Hello and welcome. Today I am making a couple loaves of same day sourdough bread. I only use einkorn flour for my sourdough, and that's because my family doesn't do well with wheat, but we can tolerate the einkorn flour. And it's a little different in texture when you're working with it, but it gives still a really good result and it tastes very similar. It is a more expensive grain, but if you can't tolerate regular wheat, it's worth it, especially if you've tried gluten-free sourdough. It's just not as good. Notice I already added in my bubbly starter, and now I'm adding in my warm water. The recipe calls for milk and water, but since we have a couple in our family with dairy allergies, I use water instead. We love the taste of honey in our homemade bread, so this is what I substitute in place of regular cane sugar. Next, I will be adding in 5.5 cups of einkorn flour. The recipe calls for all purpose, but at the time here, I only had whole grain einkorn flour, so this is what I'm using today. And because of this, it'll result in a more dense, heavier loaf, but we are okay with that. Although I would prefer the all-purpose einkorn flour. Next, I'm adding in 2.5 teaspoons of sea salt, as well as 4 tablespoons of melted butter. You can also sub melted coconut oil or avocado oil. Now stir until combined, then cover the dough with a kitchen towel and place in the lowest rack in the oven with the oven light on. Let the dough rest undisturbed for about 5 to 12 hours. After that, we are going to place the dough on a floured surface. Einkorn tends to be a little bit more sticky, so don't be afraid to use extra flour during the kneading process. I know sometimes sourdough breads can seem a little bit intimidating, but really it's only the difference of having a sourdough starter and more time. But the nutritional benefits of sourdough is so much greater because of the fermenting process, which makes it easier for our gut to digest and also has a lower glycemic index. Now I'm going to fold the dough into thirds and place into my prepared loaf pan. Cover the loaf pans with a towel and place back in the oven with the light on for about an hour. After that, remove the loaf pans from the oven and let sit at room temperature until the dough has risen close to the top of the pan. Preheat the oven to 425. Place the loaf pans in the oven and immediately reduce the temperature to 375. Bake the bread for 40 minutes, and when the bread is ready, let it cool in the loaf pan for 15 to 20 minutes. Now we're going to make our cacao protein bars, and I have 1 cup of mashed dates in my bowl, and I'm adding 1 cup of almond butter here, then a 1/4 cup of collagen protein powder, and a 1/2 cup of cacao powder. I like to make these when we know we're going to be on the road and they're just an easy, healthier snack for kids. Here I'm adding some sea salt, and this recipe will be in the description box below as well. Lastly, I'm going to add a splash of vanilla extract. Then I'm going to mix this all together. And I know I used almond butter in this recipe, but feel free to play with peanut butter or even add in some shredded coconut would be really good. Anything really that you would prefer. So this recipe actually was inspired by the Trader Joe's Coco Loco bars. And I actually forgot to add the shredded coconut in these ones, but my husband said they tasted really similar anyway, so I was happy with that. Make sure when you are pressing the mixture into your pan that you're doing it pretty firmly because you want the bars to hold their shape when you cut them. So after this, I stuck this pan in the freezer for about 20 to 30 minutes until it was just chilled. And then I took them out and cut them into bars. And this recipe will make 8 to 10 bars. You'll notice I cut mine into 8, and I think next time I will do 10 because these were decent size, especially for my younger kids. This is how I prefer to store my bars, is to individually wrap them in parchment paper. I don't like when bars stick to each other and it just becomes a bigger mess. These bars I'm going to place in the freezer so we have them for a road trip that is coming up in a few days. If they are left in the fridge, they will be eaten and we will have no snacks for our road trip. If you end up trying this recipe, let me know in the comments, and if you want me to try a different variation, let me know as well. I would love to do it. Later this evening, we are going to a church get together, so I had some extra cookie dough in my fridge that I wanted to use up, and so I decided to make some Christmas cookies. This recipe will be in the description box below. I use the Bob's Red Meal 1-to-1 flour, and I also made them a spice cookie, so I added cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg into the batter as well. Here I just made a simple glaze with a little heavy cream, powdered sugar, and vanilla. And I know you can't see this, but there are two kids staring at me while I am dipping these cookies, and they did get one, but they had to wait till mom was done. Being patient can be hard. We avoid food colors in our house, so these white sprinkles were a great addition to our cookies. And in this final glaze, I added apple cider to it, and it was really good since the cookies were a spice cookie anyway. So it just added another something special.